I've always had a goal to hit 1,000 likes on a video, but you legends smashed past that and got one of my videos to over 2K likes. Let's break even more records on this video. Please smash that like button. And I want to try this one thing. I want to know who my devoted listeners are. So once you've done that, comment down below that you hit that like button hard, or even a kind message. Let's see who our loyal devoted viewers are. You know who you are. Once again, thank you guys so much. Now to these amazing stories.
I met Dita on a Wednesday night when I wasn't really looking to meet anyone. I just started using the app again after a dry few months, and honestly, I was mostly on there for distraction. His profile had this one blurry photo of him smiling next to a dog that may or may not have been his. No real bio, just a weird quote from The Office and a bunch of emojis. For some reason, I swiped right. He messaged first, and he was actually funny. Dry, kind of sarcastic, not trying too hard. That's rare. The first date was super casual, coffee in the afternoon, which is usually my test date. Like, if you can't make it through 40 minutes over coffee without annoying me, then you're probably not worth dinner. But Dita was cool. Easygoing, good energy, not too polished. He talked a little about his work, something to do with logistics or freight or whatever. I didn't really care, but he seemed smart. Said he was divorced for 2 years, co-parenting, still figuring things out. He mentioned the kids briefly but didn't linger on it. I appreciated that. So I saw him again. This time it was drinks at this weird little bar tucked behind a used bookstore. I liked that he didn't suggest a generic spot. He showed up late, apologized like 10 times, said traffic was nuts from picking up his kids. I didn't mind. Honestly, it made him seem grounded, real. He talked more this time, about music, some old travel stories, even a bit about therapy. It felt grown up in a good way. We made out in his car after, which is something I swore I'd stop doing. But it was nice. He kissed like someone who actually enjoys kissing, not like it's a checkpoint. Then came the third date. That's when things flipped. We were at this sushi place near my apartment. Not fancy, but the kind of spot that's always busy and smells a little like soy sauce and raincoats. I remember thinking this could actually be something. Like, he asked about my job, remembered I hated my boss, and brought up this podcast I mentioned liking. All the tiny things that make you feel seen. Then his phone buzzed. He ignored it. Buzzed again. Then rang. He silenced it. Then rang again, but this time on FaceTime, and he sighed and excused himself to take it. I didn't think much of it at first. Everyone has lives. But he was gone for like 10 minutes. When he came back, he looked kind of off, smiley, but stiff. I asked if everything was okay. He said, yeah, his ex just had a question about something with the kids, but he kept glancing at his phone like it might explode. Then, while I was mid-sentence about something dumb, like this guy at work who always eats yogurt with a fork, his phone buzzed again. This time, he flipped it over real fast, but not before I saw the name on the screen. It said wifey. Like, literally, wifey, with a heart emoji. I just stared at it for a second, like maybe it was an old contact name he forgot to change. Then the phone lit up again. Same name. But this time, a message popped up. The kids are crying. Please answer. I don't know what to tell them. My stomach dropped. I didn't say anything right away. He saw me looking and kind of froze. Then he tried to laugh it off and said something about how old habits die hard, and it was just his ex being dramatic, but I wasn't buying it. I asked him flat out if he was actually divorced. He didn't answer at first. Then he said it was complicated, which is code for no. I told him to explain, and that's when the whole story came out, or at least what I managed to piece together from his sweaty, half-mumbled excuses. He wasn't divorced. He was still married, like actually married. His wife thought he was away on business trips. Apparently, she didn't even know he was dating. And the 5 kids? Yeah, all under the age of 10, which explained the chaos. Those called during dinner. That wasn't just one random check-in. His kids were calling because they hadn't talked to their dad in 2 days, and they thought something had happened. He told them he was in Chicago for work. We were literally 2 neighborhoods over from his house. I asked him why. Just why. And he said he felt trapped, that the marriage was dead, that they hadn't touched each other in years, that he needed to feel alive again. All that cliche garbage. But none of it made sense when I thought about the messages. His wife wasn't distant. She was worried. She clearly thought they were still together, that this was a normal, functioning family. I left. I didn't even finish my food. I walked out, blocked his number, deleted the app again, and just sat on a park bench down the street for like half an hour staring at a busted streetlight flickering like it had something to say. A couple days later, I got a random message on Instagram from a private account. It was her, the wife. I guess she saw my name pop up somewhere, maybe on his phone. She asked if I knew him. I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. I felt sick even reading it. Looking back, there were signs. The weird scheduling, the random disappearing acts, the fact that I never saw his place, and he always wanted to meet near mine. But I think part of me just didn't want to believe people could live double lives that easily. That someone could look you in the eye, hold your hand, kiss you in the car, and still have a whole family waiting at home clueless. Anyway, I never saw him again. I don't even know if he got caught. I didn't want to keep digging. I just kind of shut the door on that part of my brain. It's wild, though. You think you're building something with someone, and it turns out they're just renting a little emotional Airbnb while their real life's on pause. People are wild. I met May on a night that felt like a mistake from the start. I wasn't supposed to be out. My roommate had dragged me to this weird rooftop bar that served cocktails in plant pots and played glitchy house music that made it impossible to have a real conversation. But May was sitting alone at the bar with this oversized scarf wrapped around her like armor and this nervous energy, like someone who hated small talk, but ended up surrounded by it anyway. I said something dumb to her about the music sounding like a fax machine having a breakdown, and she laughed harder than she should have, like she needed to. That's how it started. She told me her name was May, just May, and said she was new to the area, figuring things out after a breakup. She looked tired, but not in a physical way, more like emotionally frayed, like a string pulled too tight for too long. We ended up leaving the bar and walking through side streets just talking about anything but dating. She mentioned her ex a little, not in that bitter way people sometimes do, but in a heavy, bruised sort of way. Said he was controlling, cruel, unpredictable. That she'd finally gotten out after years of trying. Her voice cracked once when she talked about how hard it was to sleep at night, and I remember feeling this weird protective instinct towards someone I had just met. We started seeing each other regularly. At first it was low-key, mostly at my place, which she said made her feel safer. I didn't mind. She said being out in public gave her anxiety. She said she didn't want to run into him. I didn't ask too many questions. It's hard to know how to navigate that stuff when someone tells you they're healing from something. You don't want to press them, but you also don't want to ignore the weird stuff completely. The first time she stayed the night, she cried in her sleep, like actual sobbing. I didn't wake her up, just laid there next to her feeling completely useless. When she woke up, she acted like nothing happened. But later that day, she told me the whole story, or at least what I thought was the story. She said her ex had threatened her more than once, that he was emotionally manipulative and violent, that she was still scared of him. I told her she could stay as long as she needed. After that, it was like she lived with me. She had stuff in my closet, her shampoo in my bathroom, her phone always charging in the kitchen. I didn't even really notice how fast it was all happening until one day I came home and she had rearranged some of my books. She said it helped her focus to alphabetize things. It was small, but I remember thinking, wait, is this a relationship now? Then things started getting weird. One night, she freaked out over a noise in the hallway and insisted we stay silent with the lights off for almost an hour. I thought maybe she was having a panic attack, but she was calm, focused, like she was expecting someone. After that night, she kept her phone on silent and only texted in certain corners of the apartment. I'd walk in and she'd flip the screen down fast. She said she was being careful, that he might be tracking her. Then one day while I was at work, my downstairs neighbor texted me asking if everything was all right. She said there were 2 cops at the building earlier asking about a woman who matched May's description. Said they didn't give much info, just showed a photo and left. I didn't know what to make of it. I texted May and she replied with a single, "Don't worry about it. I'll explain later." That later turned into never. A few days after the cop visit, I got home and the vibe was off immediately. May was pacing, frantic, throwing stuff into her bag. When I asked what was going on, she said something vague about a misunderstanding and how she had to go. I was confused, trying to get more out of her, but she just kept saying she'd text me. Then she was gone. I didn't hear from her for 2 weeks. When she finally did reach out, it was from a new number. She sent a short message. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into this." That was it. I tried calling, texting, nothing. The number eventually went dead. I didn't know what to do. Part of me was worried she'd gotten hurt. Part of me was pissed. I started trying to piece together the gaps in her story. I couldn't find her online, no social media, no mutuals, nothing. So I did something I probably shouldn't have. I messaged a friend of mine who works at a local paper. I just gave him her name and asked if he could check if anything came up. I wasn't expecting much, but what he found made my stomach twist. Turns out, May wasn't running from an abusive ex. She was a one with a restraining order. Multiple ones, actually. Her name was in court records. Harassment, breaking and entering, violating a no-contact order. The guy she said was dangerous. He had filed a report against her for showing up at his job, slashing his tires, threatening his girlfriend. It got worse. She'd been hiding out in different places for months, bouncing from couch to couch, using Tinder to find guys to stay with. One of them had even filed a police report when he realized she was using a fake name. I sat there in my room reading all this, remembering how she cried in my bed, how she made oatmeal in the mornings, how she used to fall asleep on my chest like I was some kind of safe place. And the whole time, she was hiding from the cops in my apartment. I didn't even know her real last name until I saw it in those reports. I never heard from her again. For weeks after, I felt like I was in some surreal fog. Like, was any of it real? Did she actually like me, or was I just the next stop on whatever messed up ride she was on? I kept trying to replay things in my head, looking for signs I missed. But the truth is, when someone is really good at lying, and I mean really good, you don't stand a chance. They build a story with just enough holes that your empathy fills them in. She moved through my life like smoke, sudden, everywhere, and then gone. And I never even knew her. The night I met Daniel, I wasn't even supposed to be on the app. I had deleted it 3 days earlier in a fit of self-respect, but then my ex posted some cringy engagement pics, and I guess I spiraled. We downloaded it, reactivated everything, and there he was. Daniel, with a golden retriever smile and that kind of square jaw that looks like it came with its own theme music. His bio said he worked in tech, loved hiking, and was a family man at heart. That last part should have been my clue, but I was in a mood, so I swiped right. We matched instantly. He messaged within minutes. The usual stuff at first. Where are you from? What do you do? Blah, blah. But then he started getting more thoughtful. Asked about my favorite movie growing up. Said he was into film too, especially anything with a good story. He said he had a soft spot for underdogs, told me about this short film he cried at once on a plane, and even admitted he still calls his mom every Sunday. I was hooked. We made plans for dinner. He picked this cozy Italian spot downtown that had those red checkered tablecloths and twinkly lights in the window, the kind of place that smells like garlic and old wine. He was already at the table when I got there, looking effortlessly put together, casual button down, nice watch, clean shoes. He stood up to greet me, smiled like he meant it, and honestly, I felt like I was walking into a scene from a rom-com. The first hour was perfect. He was funny but not overbearing, asked real questions, and actually listened to the answers. He told me about his job, something about back-end systems, which I barely understood but nodded through. He made fun of himself for being boring, but he wasn't. He had this warmth that you could tell he'd be the type to remember your coffee order or leave notes in your coat pocket. Then somewhere between the pasta and dessert, the vibe shifted a little. He paused, got a little quieter, and said he wanted to be honest with me about something. I felt my stomach flip. I thought he was about to say he wasn't over his ex or that he had some weird hobby involving taxidermy or something. But instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. He said, "My mom's really sick, and it's been hard to talk about, but I think it's important, you know." Then he showed me this photo. A woman lying in a hospital bed, looking pale and frail, with an oxygen tube and everything. She looked like she hadn't smiled in years. He said it was taken a few weeks ago, that she had a rare condition, and he'd been flying back and forth to care for her. That's why he was slow to respond sometimes. That's why he seemed tired. I didn't know what to say except, "I'm so sorry." He nodded like he'd heard it 100 times. We didn't talk much after that. He seemed heavy, like the story had taken something out of him. I paid the bill because he forgot his wallet in his car, which felt minor at the time, given the circumstances. Later that night, lying in bed, I kept thinking about that photo. Something about it bugged me, but I couldn't figure out what. It was too perfect, almost like a movie still. The way the light hit her face, the blanket folded so neatly, even the IV bag looked clean and centered like it was placed for dramatic effect. I figured maybe it was taken by a hospital photographer or something, but the next morning I couldn't shake it. I remembered what he said about liking stories, and something just felt off. So I reversed image searched it, just to be sure. And there it was. Stock photo. First result. Senior woman in hospital bed from some medical image site. Free to download. Same lighting, same expression, same everything. I sat there staring at the screen, phone in hand, heart pounding for no good reason except pure secondhand embarrassment. The man literally Googled a sick old woman and passed her off as his mom. He saved it to his phone like it was part of his ID. At first I laughed, I really did. Just this short, incredulous laugh that sounded more like a cough. Then it sank in and I felt weird. Like gross weird. Like, who does that? And why? It's one thing to exaggerate your job or say you're between apartments, but faking a dying mother, that's straight up manipulative. I didn't confront him right away. I wanted to see what else he'd say. So I messaged him that night and asked how his mom was doing. He said, rough day. She's not eating much anymore. It's hard. I asked what hospital she was in. He dodged it. I asked if she had a specific diagnosis. He said it was complicated. I knew he was full of it, but I wanted to see how far he'd go. Then I asked if he had any siblings helping out. He said he was an only child. Weird because on his Instagram, which I found after a little digging, there were photos from a year ago with a younger sister tagged in them. I clicked on her page, and there were recent pictures of their mom. Very much alive, very much healthy, at brunch, smiling, holding a mimosa. That was the moment I decided to call him out. I sent him a screenshot of the stock photo, then another of the Instagram. I told him he needed help and not the kind he could find online. He replied once, I'm sorry. I just wanted you to take me seriously. That was it. I didn't respond. He unmatched me, blocked me, disappeared. For days, I kept wondering what his angle was. Did he think the story would make him more sympathetic? That I'd go easier on him? That he could somehow buy time with fake grief? The whole thing felt like emotional catfishing. Like instead of pretending to be someone else, he pretended to have a whole tragedy just to get my attention. I told a friend about it, and she said maybe he was just lonely. But honestly, everyone's lonely. That doesn't make it okay to drag strangers into a fake trauma spiral. It's like trying to get pity points by borrowing someone else's pain, except the pain isn't even real. It's been months now, and sometimes I still think about that dinner. Not because I miss him or anything, but because it taught me that anyone can wear a good face for a night. They can sit across from you, tell you stories that make you want to reach across the table and hold their hand, and the whole time, it's scripted. Daniel was a good actor, but I wasn't in the mood for a performance. It all started because of a canceled gym class. I had booked this early morning session I definitely didn't want to go to, but when it got canceled last minute, I suddenly had a whole free Saturday with no plans and way too much coffee in my system. I ended up on Tinder, mostly just to swipe out of boredom, not even looking to talk to anyone. That's when Melissa popped up. Her profile was clean. One picture of her at a bookstore, another laughing with a cup of coffee, and one at the beach that somehow looked candid even though you could tell it wasn't. Her bio was short, fluent in sarcasm. Book collector. Smiles a lot. She looked like she had her life together in a way I found annoying but also kind of attractive. I swiped right, she matched back, and we started chatting immediately. She was charming in a way that didn't feel fake, smart without being a show-off. We talked about everything. Favorite movies, worst dates, the weirdest dreams we'd ever had. It wasn't flirty at first, which made it feel even better. It was like texting someone I already knew, which sounds cheesy, but that's how it felt. We made plans for coffee that same weekend. We met at this indie coffee shop downtown that smells like cinnamon and old books, the kind of place people pretend to read Kafka in just to impress strangers. She walked in wearing this green coat and a lazy ponytail and smiled like I was the one who made her day. The date lasted 4 hours. We didn't even realize how long we'd been sitting there until the barista asked if we wanted to order anything else or just hang out. We both laughed and walked out together, and I remember she lightly touched my arm at the crosswalk and said, "This was nice. Let's do it again." The second date turned into the third, then the fourth. She told me she worked at a marketing firm, handled big clients, and had a boss who was basically allergic to fun. I used to joke that we should fake a company and become her next paid account just to mess with him. She loved the idea. She was sharp like that. Quick comebacks, always a step ahead. I really liked her. I liked her. Not just the usual, this could go somewhere stuff. I found myself checking my phone, waiting for her texts, rereading the funny ones, making playlists she'd like. It was heading somewhere real, or so I thought. Then, one night, everything snapped into place in the worst way. She invited me out to drinks on a Thursday, said it had been a rough week, and she needed something casual and low-key. We went to this bar near her office, kind of fancy, with mood lighting and tiny plates of food you had to squint at to figure out. She seemed tense when we met, like something was on her mind, but I figured it was just work stuff. I offered to listen if she wanted to vent, and she smiled and said later, "I just want to forget about it for now." About 20 minutes in, while we were mid-convo about something dumb, I think it was about whether cats or dogs were secretly more manipulative, she suddenly straightened up. Her eyes locked on someone across the bar. I followed her gaze and saw this tall guy in a suit talking to the bartender. He looked important, slick like the kind of guy who always had cologne on and never skipped arm-tay. Melissa's whole posture shifted. She brushed her hair behind her ear and adjusted her sweater. And she leaned in closer to me like we were a couple in a movie. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was an old friend or someone she didn't want to talk to. But then she reached over and put her hand on mine, something she never really did in public, and looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. I asked her if she was okay. She just said, "He's here," like I was supposed to know who that meant. Turns out that guy was her boss, the same one she always complained about. And apparently she had a massive crush on him. Or used to. Or maybe still did. I wasn't really sure. What I was sure about is that I was being used. Over the next hour, it became painfully obvious. She leaned into me more, laughed harder than usual, touched my arm more than she ever had before. It felt rehearsed. And sure enough, I caught her checking to see if he was watching. He was. He came over eventually, said hi to her, looked me up and down like I was a name tag. She introduced me as her new boyfriend, which threw me off completely. I tried to keep my cool, nodded, shook his hand, but my brain was spinning. He left a few minutes later, and she didn't even try to explain. Just downed the rest of her drink and said she was tired. When I asked what that was all about, she said, "It's complicated," and called a ride without saying anything else. I walked home that night feeling like a prop. A few days later, she ghosted me, like full vanish. No texts, no replies, nothing. I waited a week and sent a message asking if she was okay. Silence. Then one of her coworkers messaged me on Instagram, which was weird since I'd never talked to any of them. He said, "Hey, I just wanted to give you a heads up. Melissa told HR you were stalking her. I don't know what happened between you two, but you might want to be careful." I couldn't believe it. I hadn't even contacted her since that last message. I never went near her office, never tried to call, nothing. I was still trying to process the weird fake boyfriend setup, and now I was being treated like some creep. I tried to clear things up, but what could I even do? I wasn't her coworker. I didn't work there. I didn't even know anyone else in her life. She just disappeared and left this weird stain behind, like I'd been a disposable tool in some office drama I didn't even know I was part of. Looking back, it makes sense. The way she played things cool, never got too personal, always seemed like she was juggling something behind the scenes. I was the perfect candidate. I was available, nice, low drama, just enough of a good listener to make it believable. I was never the goal. I was the stage. She wanted him to see her as desirable. She used me as a costume. And when it didn't work out, when he didn't take the bait, she tossed the whole performance, including me. I still think about it sometimes. Not because I miss her, but because it made me question how easily people can script things. How sometimes you're just filling in a role you didn't audition for, in a story someone else is directing. If I had to describe Yasin in one word, it would have been sweet, like sweet in a quiet, awkward kind of way. Not the fake sweet that comes with winking emojis and overdone compliments. He was more the type to open doors, say thank you too many times, and get nervous trying to order at Starbucks. We matched on a Tuesday night when I couldn't sleep and figured I'd kill time swiping through strangers. His profile was full of artsy mirror selfies, captions like low-key bookworm, and a painfully average cat named Miso that he seemed to love like it was his child. He messaged me first, which I always appreciate, and instead of the usual, hey, or what's up, he sent this long message asking what I thought about dreams and if I ever believed they meant anything. It was weird, but kind of refreshing. Like someone who thought too much, but in a good way. We ended up talking until almost 3 in the morning, switching from dreams to music to weird childhood fears. His vibe was calm and careful, like he was tiptoeing through the conversation, trying not to mess it up. Our first date was at this little ramen spot tucked between a laundromat and nail salon. He showed up in this oversized hoodie and beat-up sneakers, holding a book like he hadn't planned to stop reading it until the last second. He smiled a lot but didn't make a ton of eye contact. Said he was shy in person and better with texts. I didn't mind. I actually liked that he wasn't performing for me. It felt different from all the overly confident guys I'd met before. Dinner was great. He told me about his job and that some hobby photography thing he was getting into, and his weird obsession with old elevators. Like he actually followed an Instagram page about vintage elevator buttons. It was nerdy but endearing. I invited him over afterward, mostly because I felt comfortable around him in a way that didn't happen often. He didn't push anything, didn't even try to kiss me. Just said thanks for a great night and left like a gentleman from another era. He started coming over more after that, usually on weekends, sometimes just to hang out and watch movies or cook something random. I started noticing little things. He always wanted to use the bathroom mirror before we watched anything, said he needed to freshen up, which was fine, except he always stayed in there for a while, like 10 or 15 minutes sometimes. I figured he was just one of those guys who liked to check his skin or fix his hair or whatever. But then one Sunday morning, after he left, I went into the bathroom and saw that the mirror had fingerprints all over the sides. Not in a normal way either, like they were pressed around the edge, as if someone had been holding something against the glass. I wiped it off and didn't think much of it. But the next weekend, it happened again. This time there were smudges right in the center, like something had been pushed flat against it. I thought maybe he leaned in too close or something. It was weird, but I brushed it off. It wasn't until the third time that it clicked. I went in right after he left and noticed something small near the sink. A lens cap. At first, I didn't even register what it was. I picked it up, flipped it around in my hand, and then realized it was from a small camera. Not a phone, not a webcam. A camera. I stood there staring at the mirror, heart racing, and that's when I saw it. A tiny dot near the corner of the frame. It looked like a regular screw, but when I leaned in, it wasn't. It was a pinhole lens. I froze. I didn't know what to do at first. I pulled the mirror off the wall, and behind it was this small magnetic strip with a camera stuck to the back. A real one, like something out of a low-budget spy movie. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I kept thinking there had to be a mistake, that maybe he was testing something for work or helping a friend or, I don't even know, my brain was trying to make it make sense. But there was no other explanation. He'd been filming my bathroom. Every time he said he needed to freshen up, he'd been setting it up. I don't even want to think about what he did with the footage. I didn't call the police right away. I sat on my couch for almost 2 hours holding the camera, staring at my phone, replaying every interaction we had. The quiet smiles, the long talks, the hand he rested on my knee while we watched movies. All of it suddenly felt like a costume. Eventually I called a friend, told her everything, and she lost it. Told me to report it immediately, so I did. I went to the station, showed them the camera, gave them his full name, his number, his socials. I don't know what happened after that. They said they'd look into it, that these things take time. But I didn't hear back. Not really. Just one message a week later saying they'd reached out to the subject. A few days after I filed the report, I got a text from a random number. No named, just a message that said, "I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to understand you better." That was it. I blocked the number immediately. I didn't even want to see his face again, let alone hear what twisted explanation he thought made it okay. I changed the locks, got a new mirror, bought one of those spy camera detectors on Amazon, and scanned every inch of my apartment. I didn't sleep right for weeks. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow felt suspicious. The idea that someone was watching me, not just watching but choosing to, when I thought I was safe, that messed me up in a way I still haven't fully unpacked. What really got to me was how normal he seemed, how harmless, sweet even, the kind of guy who talks about dreams and rescues cats and says please too often. That's what scared me the most. He didn't seem like the kind of person who'd ever violate someone like that. But he did. And now every time I meet someone new, no matter how kind they seem, a part of me wonders what I'm not seeing, what they're really doing when they say they're just freshening up. I met Tutu on a night I wasn't even supposed to be on Tinder. I had deleted the app 3 weeks earlier after a string of dates that made me consider joining a monastery. But boredom is powerful, and I re-downloaded it while waiting for laundry to finish at some sketchy 24-hour laundromat that smelled like wet socks and burnt coffee. Swiped right a few times out of pure muscle memory, and then boom, there she was. Tutu. Her profile said, part-time yoga teacher, full-time chaos coordinator. One photo had her balancing on a paddleboard in the middle of a lake. Another showed her holding a goat at what I can only assume was some farm-themed party. And the last one was just her grinning wildly at the camera with paint on her cheeks. She looked alive in a way I hadn't felt in months. She messaged first. "Do you believe in aliens or are you boring?" I said. I believed they'd already seen Earth and wisely decided not to land. She replied, "Smart. Let's get noodles." I liked her energy. It felt like getting shoved into a cold pool and realizing it was kind of nice. We met the next night at this tiny noodle bar that was somehow always busy but never full. She showed up wearing a hoodie with a giant cartoon shrimp on it and Crocs with different colored straps. Her hair was tied up with what looked like a shoelace. She didn't wear makeup and ordered extra chili oil like she was trying to prove something. From the jump, she was electric. Talked fast, laughed at her own jokes. Didn't wait for me to catch up. She told me she used to be an event planner but got fired after turning a wedding into a flash mob. Said she didn't regret it. They remembered the day forever, so technically I did my job. She asked me questions like, if you could punch one cloud, which one would it be? And what's your panic meal? Like, what do you cook when your life is falling apart? She made me feel like we were kids in a treehouse, just making stuff up to pass the time. There was no awkwardness, no small talk, just chaos in a good way. We kept seeing each other. Not regularly, that wasn't her style, but consistently. Every time felt like a short film. One date she blindfolded me and drove us to a petting zoo she said was underrated and underpopulated. Another time we broke into an abandoned greenhouse just to eat sandwiches and guess what used to grow there. She lived like the world was a dare. But Tutu was also unpredictable in ways that made it hard to feel stable. She'd disappear for days, not reply to texts, then suddenly send me a photo of her with a llama and say, "Guess where I am?" I'd ask if everything was okay and she'd just say, "Yeah, just vibing." She never explained anything and got uncomfortable if I asked too much. One night, we were lying on the hood of her car, watching planes fly overhead, and she said, I always date people I can disappear from. I asked what she meant, and she said, if I coasted you tomorrow, you'd probably be fine, right? I laughed it off at the time, but it stuck with me. A couple weeks later, she invited me to this house party. Said it was her friend's birthday and they needed more vaguely tolerable humans in attendance. I said sure. She picked me up wearing a leopard print coat and playing Euro techno at a volume that rattled the windows. I asked if she'd been drinking. She said, nope, just legally high on a cherry Slurpee. The party was chaotic. People everywhere. Glitter on the floor. A guy doing karaoke with no music. Tutu floated through the room like she owned it, introducing me to people with made-up names. This is my accountant/manicurist/ex-boyfriend. She said about me once. I laughed thinking she was joking. I didn't realize she wasn't. At some point, I lost her in the crowd. When I finally found her again, she was out back, not alone. She was talking to a guy in a way that didn't look casual. Close. Intense, like they had history. I waited until she walked away from him, then asked, who was that? She looked at me and just said, oh, that's Cam. We used to date. I asked, and now? She shrugged. Sometimes we still do. I stared at her, not sure if I'd misheard. She sipped her drink and said, it's complicated. You're fun, he's history. I like both. Does it have to be either or? I said, you could have told me. She said, I don't tell people things they can't handle. I left the party. She texted me the next day saying, sorry if last night threw you off. I get overwhelmed by people who want definitions. I didn't reply. A week later, she sent a voice memo of her singing, come on, Eileen, off key. Then nothing after that. Sometimes I still check her Instagram. It's a stream of color, road trips, thrift stores, new piercings, half-written poems. She looks like she's still chasing something. Or running. Dating her felt like being in a tornado that smells like flowers. You're dizzy the whole time, but part of you keeps thinking, maybe I could live here. Now when I meet someone new, I ask more questions. And if they say their name is Tutu, I leave the app immediately. I matched with Eunice during one of those weird weeks where nothing in my life felt real. Work was dragging, my roommate was annoying me, and I just found out my favorite sandwich shop had shut down without warning. I remember thinking, sure, let's add emotional risk to this chaos, and opened Tinder out of pure boredom. His profile stood out because it was actually normal. He wasn't holding a fish. No gym mirror selfies. No cringy pickup lines or references to sapiosexual energy. Just a nice clean set of photos, one hiking, one laughing with friends, and one of him wearing glasses at a desk with a bunch of monitors in the background. Bio said, financial advisor, book lover, part-time chef in denial. He had this smart but chill vibe in our messages, like he knew how to talk about serious stuff without making it sound like a job interview. He asked me if I'd ever read The Psychology of Money, which I hadn't, but I pretended I had, and we started talking about saving versus spending and how everyone pretends to understand crypto. He had jokes, but they were low-key. It didn't feel like he was trying to win me over, just that he knew who he was and didn't care if I got it or not. We met for drinks at this rooftop bar that overlooked the city skyline. He was already sitting at the corner table when I arrived, wearing this navy jacket and sipping something with lime in it. He smiled when he saw me and stood up, which is such a small gesture but always catches me off guard. Most guys just wave and point like they're flagging down a bus. Eunice was different. The conversation that night was mostly about dreams, not the weird kind, but life stuff. He told me he used to want to be a novelist and even wrote a full draft of a book in college. I told him I wanted to open a thrift bookstore one day, even though I can't keep my room organized for more than 2 days. We clicked. Like, clicked in that way you hope for but never expect. After that night, we kept seeing each other. Dinner dates, game nights, even a Sunday farmer's market run where he picked out tomatoes like he was judging a cooking competition. He talked about work a lot, always vaguely. Said he had private clients he managed investments for, mostly older people who didn't want to deal with the stress of managing money. He said he helped them diversify, kept them out of scams, made sure their retirement was stable. Sounded noble enough. But there was this one night he came over and casually mentioned that a client made 6K in a day because of a token they bought through him. I asked him if he worked with crypto, and he said, sometimes, but only the smart stuff. I didn't think much of it. Everyone's into crypto now. But then he started getting more intense about it. He'd send me screenshots of wallet balances, charts, graphs. I didn't understand any of it. Then he started dropping hints. Said if I ever wanted to dabble in digital investing, he helped me get started. Said I was smart and had the mindset for passive income. I kind of laughed it off, told him I barely understood how to file my taxes, and he backed off. But after that, our dates slowly started turning into little pitch meetings. We go out for drinks and somehow end up talking about tokens and white papers and digital wallets. He mentioned upcoming coin launches the way normal people talk about new movies. At one point, I asked him if this was his actual job or just a side hustle. He said he used to be traditional, but that old money is slow money, and that he was building a new kind of investment firm. Said he only worked with high-trust clients and didn't advertise because he believed in organic growth. That's when it clicked. He was grooming me to be a client. I started digging a little. I Googled his name with every keyword I could think of. Finance, crypto, scam, review, anything. Nothing came up. No LinkedIn. No firm website. Just an old SoundCloud link from like 7 years ago, where he posted lo-fi beats under a different name. I found that weird. Most finance guys are all over the internet trying to look legit. Eunice barely existed online. A week later, I got a DM from a girl I didn't know. She found me through Instagram because Eunice had commented on one of my stories. She asked if I knew him well and said she didn't mean to intrude, but wanted to warn me. I messaged back immediately, heart racing. What she told me didn't even sound real. She said she dated him for a month, that he talked about investing the same way with her, that he eventually convinced her to send him $3,000 in Ethereum to buy into a pre-launch coin that never existed. After she sent it, he ghosted her. Then 2 months later, he matched with her friend on Hinge and tried the exact same thing. She said she'd found at least 3 other women through Reddit who had similar stories. All of them met him on dating apps. All of them were convinced to send money. None of them ever saw it again. I felt sick. I didn't confront him right away. I wanted to see if he'd try the same thing with me. The next time we hung out, he brought up a new opportunity. Said it wasn't for everyone, but that he thought I was smart enough to get in early. I told him I'd think about it. He smiled and said, no pressure, but timing matters. That night, I reported his profile on Tinder. I also messaged the girl back and asked for screenshots of what he said to her. She had everything. Messages, wallet receipts, even a voice memo he sent promising returns. I set it all to the app and blocked him everywhere. A few days later, I got a new match under a different name. Different pictures, same energy. I knew it was him. The way he messaged, the phrasing, the "you seem emotionally intelligent" line he used on me. It was like he had a script. I reported that one too. I don't know how many people he scammed. I don't even know if he was ever caught. I doubt it. He was careful. Smart enough to stay just below the radar. Too charming to raise alarms until it was too late. Sometimes I still see guys like him online. Clean photos, vague bios, buzzwords like freedom and vision. I scroll past them quick now. Because once you meet someone who looks at love like a lead funnel, you never really look at dating the same again. I met Nikita during that weird in-between season where it's not quite winter, but still cold enough to make everyone complain. The city looked gray, my heating was acting up, and my mood matched the weather. I had sworn off dating for the 3rd time that year, but one night, stuck on a bus with dead headphones and no Wi-Fi, I opened Tinder just to see what was out there. Her profile popped up almost immediately, her in a red dress on a boat, another shot laughing over wine, and one where she's standing in front of a canyon, arms out like she was about to fly. Her bio said, "Let's make our exes jealous." I thought she was joking. I laughed out loud, actually. Swiped right because, hey, at least she had a sense of humor. We matched a few minutes later. Her first message was, "So what's our story?" which I found clever. We bounced messages back and forth all week. She was sharp, quick with replies, always throwing in little one-liners that made me smile. There was something about her that felt like a challenge, not in a mean way, but in that magnetic way where you want to keep impressing the other person. She suggested the weekend getaway. I'd never even met her in person yet, but she pitched this idea like we'd been dating for months. Let's get out of the city. Cabin, wine, bad board games. I hesitated. It sounded impulsive, borderline crazy, but she sold it well. Said her friend had a place a few hours outside the city that they weren't using. It would just be the two of us, low-key, no pressure. Part of me wanted to say no. The other part was tired of playing it safe, so I said yes. She picked me up Friday afternoon in this tiny car filled with snacks, blankets, and a Bluetooth speaker playing indie love songs. She wore sunglasses even though the sky was overcast, and she talked the whole way there. Stories about her job, her childhood dog, a disastrous family vacation in Greece. She asked questions too, but always found a way to loop the conversation back to something dramatic. She mentioned her ex a couple times, but brushed it off like it wasn't important. "He's old news," she said at one point. Dead to me. The cabin was nice, rustic but not creepy like something you'd see in a cozy horror movie. Wood paneling, a stone fireplace, a deck overlooking a lake that looked more like a puddle with ambition. We unpacked, cooked pasta, opened wine. She played music while we ate and made me guess which artist was playing like we were in some weird quiz show. It was fun. She was magnetic in that way some people are when you're in their world, like everything revolves around them without them even trying. But then things started to shift. Saturday morning, she was weirdly quiet, sitting on the deck staring at her phone like it had offended her. I asked if everything was okay, and she said she just needed to clear her head. I gave her space. A few hours later, she was back to laughing and drinking coffee like nothing happened. But throughout the day, I kept catching her checking her phone obsessively. Not just glancing. Full on unlocking, scrolling, locking it, unlocking it again a few seconds later. It was like she was waiting for something. That night, we built a fire and sat under a bunch of blankets. She got drunk faster than I expected and got emotional. Started talking about her ex again. Said it used to make her playlists, and then one day just stopped. That he ghosted her after 3 years. Said she'd never fully recovered. I didn't know what to say. It was one of those moments where you feel like a stand-in, like someone else's emotional mom. She got up at one point and went outside for a call. I watched her pacing back and forth on the porch, holding her phone to her ear, waving her free hand around like she was arguing. She came back inside 20 minutes later acting like nothing happened. Said she was talking to her mom. But the next morning, her phone lit up while she was showering, and I saw the name on the screen. Alex. Do not answer. I didn't touch it, just stared at it until it stopped ringing. That afternoon, we drove into town to grab some groceries. On the way back, she asked me to stop at this overlook to take some photos. Said the lighting was perfect. We parked, and she pulled out her phone and asked me to stand with her by the railing. I figured she just wanted a cute memory. She held up her phone and took a bunch of selfies. Then some of just me, then one with her arm wrapped around mine like we were a real couple. That night after dinner, she disappeared into the bathroom for half an hour. I heard her pacing, talking softly. When she came out, she was glowing. The kind of glow that doesn't come from good skincare. It was smug. I asked what was up, and she just smiled and said, "Let's just say things are about to get interesting." I didn't press her. I didn't want to ruin the mood, and honestly, I was too confused to even know what to ask. But on the drive back to the city the next day, she was buzzing. Giddy almost. She kept checking her phone and smirking. Then halfway through the drive, she blurted out, "So, I may have posted some of those photos," and tagged Alex. I blinked. Alex. "My ex," she said, like it was obvious. I told him I was moving on. He didn't believe me. So I proved it. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. She told me she'd invited me on this trip because she knew he'd see it. Said he still watched her stories, still lurked on her page, still hadn't moved on. She needed him to see her happy. She needed him to know she could be with someone else. Someone better. Someone who, according to her caption, was intentional, present, and not a coward. It hit me like a ton of bricks. The whole weekend, the wine, the photos, the arm around mine, the mysterious call on the porch. It was all part of some twisted plan to make her ex jealous. I was the prop, the backup actor, the believable distraction. I didn't say much the rest of the ride. She dropped me off, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "You're honestly the best. Thank you for this." I never heard from her again. Not you, I hope you're well. She unfollowed me 2 days later, deleted the photos, and posted a blurry quote about closure and growth. Sometimes I wonder if he ever saw those pictures, if he cared, if he called her, if they got back together. Maybe that was the plan all along. Or maybe I was just a pawn in a battle that ended before I ever joined the game. Either way, I learned something important that weekend. Never go on a romantic getaway with someone whose bio says, "Let's make our exes jealous." Sometimes the truth is hiding in plain sight, and sometimes you're just the story someone needs to tell to someone else. It started like one of those interactions you forget 5 minutes after it happens. I was sitting in my car waiting for a parking spot to open up when I matched with Matt. His profile wasn't anything special. A blurry photo of him hiking, one of him with a dog, standard, and a black and white selfie that looked like he was trying too hard not to smile. The bio was vague: introvert, thinker, observer. Let's talk about things that matter. Honestly, I only swiped right because I was bored and his dog was cute, but he messaged first and didn't say anything cringe, so I replied. The first few conversations were surprisingly normal. He wasn't overly flirty or trying to impress me with dumb jokes. He asked good questions, like weird specific ones. Things like, when do you think kids stop being honest? And what kind of lie are you most comfortable telling? At first, it felt a little philosophical, like a guy who listens to too many podcasts. But the way he followed up made it feel like he was actually paying attention to my answers. We started talking daily, sometimes until 2 or 3 in the morning. He had this kind of gentle energy. Said he was a grad student doing research on media and behavior. Told me he had a small YouTube channel where he did commentary on internet culture. I never asked for the link. I figured it was just another guy giving opinions into the void. We met up for the first time at this coffee shop I liked, the kind with mismatched chairs and a barista who looked like he was allergic to joy. Matt showed up in a gray hoodie and jeans, holding a little notebook and a half-finished bottle of mineral water. He seemed nervous in a quiet way, like he was constantly replaying his words before saying them. But he was sweet. He didn't check his phone once. He asked about my favorite teacher growing up and told me about his old hamster that used to escape and hide in the laundry machine. I left that date thinking he was maybe a little awkward, but in a good way. Safe, harmless. Our second date was a walk in the park near his place. It was one of those chilly days where the wind keeps changing direction and your hair won't stay put no matter what you do. He brought hot chocolate in a thermos and didn't try to hold my hand or make any moves. We sat on a bench and talked about memory, not ours, but the idea of memory. He said he was fascinated by how people remember things wrong or differently, and how that says more about them than the actual event. I didn't realize how weird that was at the time. It just felt deep, and I liked that he wasn't afraid to be serious. We saw each other a few more times over the next few weeks. Each time he'd ask more layered, personal questions. Stuff about my parents, my old relationships, what I regretted. I chalked it up to him being into psychology or maybe just really curious. But one night, he came over to my place and I noticed something strange. I'd gotten up to grab us drinks from the kitchen, and when I came back, he was holding his phone under the table. Not looking at it, holding it flat, screen down like he had been recording. I asked if he was checking something, and he got weirdly defensive. Said he was just silencing it. I brushed it off. Maybe I didn't want to admit it felt off. Then one morning, I woke up to a message from my coworker, Jen. She sent me a screenshot from a Reddit thread. The title was Observing Female Behavior IRL, entry 37. It was on some obscure community about studying gender dynamics, which already made my skin crawl. But what caught my eye was the story in the post. It was about a girl from Tinder who said her favorite childhood book was Harriet the Spy, had a scar on her left knee from falling off a scooter, and made a weird face when she was concentrating. That was me, word for word. The post was written like I was some kind of research subject. He described everything about our second date, the park, the bench, the way I held the thermos with both hands like a child. He analyzed my answers to his questions like a scientist breaking down lab results. Called me emotionally warm but inconsistent. Said I exhibited signs of early attachment strain. Then at the bottom, there was a link to a YouTube video titled Case Study, The Overthinker. I clicked on it. My voice was in it. Not my face, thankfully, but a blurred out video of me walking next to him, and short audio clips of our conversations, chopped and edited to sound like a psychology case file. He narrated over it in that calm podcast voice, saying things like, "Here's where she deflects with humor," and noticed the shift in tone when vulnerability is introduced. He even slowed down a clip of me laughing like he was trying to break it down into data. I felt sick. I didn't even finish the video. I shut it down and just sat there, staring at the wall, trying to process what I had seen. I couldn't believe I had been spending time with someone who looked at me like content, like something to dissect. I wasn't a person to him. I was material. A subject in his little experiment. I messaged him. One line, "What the hell is this?" He read it and didn't respond. I reported his channel, reported the Reddit post, took screenshots of everything and sent it to the app, to the school he said he went to literally anyone I could think of. I don't know if any of it did anything. His videos were still up for weeks. The Reddit thread got locked eventually, but not before I saw that he posted dozens of other stories like mine. Some were clearly other girls he had dated. He gave them fake names, but the details were real. One girl talked about her fear of planes. Another always wore red lipstick. He broke them all down like they were statistics. It made me paranoid for months. I stopped using dating apps. Started wondering if I was being recorded every time I talked to someone new. I started hearing my own voice in my head the way he had cut it up in that video, like I was turning into my own case study. It messed with me more than I expected. And the worst part, he never technically broke any laws. I let him into my life. I spoke willingly. I never said, "Don't record this." He just took advantage of that little gray space between right and wrong, used kindness like a tool, and I walked right into it. So yeah, when people ask me now why I don't date much, I usually just shrug and say, long story. Because if I told them the truth, that I once dated a guy who used our conversations as research for a YouTube series about female behavior, I don't think they'd believe me. And honestly, I don't blame them. I barely believed it myself. She messaged me first, which was rare enough, but what really caught my eye was that she didn't waste any time. No hey or how's your week? Just straight to the point. You look like you've survived at least 3 horrible dates. Am I wrong? I laughed because it was true and replied with 4, actually. But who's counting? That kicked off a weirdly smooth back and forth that lasted most of the day. Her name was Jessica, and she was funny in this dry, effortless way that made you forget you were texting a stranger. Her photos were a mix of polished and messy, one in a blazer like she just walked out of a meeting, one on the floor in leggings with a half-eaten pizza, and one of her hugging a giant golden retriever with a neon scrunchie on her wrist. She told me she worked in PR, lived with her sister temporarily, and had a complicated relationship with Kathy. We had that instant rhythm that makes it feel like you've known someone way longer than you have. I asked her out for drinks that weekend, and she said yes without hesitation. We met at this dive bar near her place that had sticky tables and neon signs that buzzed louder than the music. She walked in wearing this oversized jacket and jeans with paint stains on them, said she'd been helping her sister redecorate, and hoped I didn't expect anything fancy. She was warm and a little chaotic, the kind of person who talks with their hands and knocks over their drink mid-story. But it didn't feel like an act. It felt real. We talked about everything. Bad roommates, old jobs, weird dreams. I told her about the time I fell asleep during a meeting, and she told me about the time she broke her heel at a funeral and limped through the eulogy. By the end of the night, we were sitting outside on a cold bench, sharing fries and talking about how weird it is that some people still use Facebook to flirt. She didn't make any moves, didn't lean in for a kiss or play with her hair or any of those typical signals. Instead, she just looked at me for a second and said, "You seem like someone who knows how to sit with sad people." It was a weird thing to say, but I felt weirdly honored. On our second date, she went up more. Told me her last relationship ended pretty badly. Said he dumped her out of nowhere, moved cities, and deleted her on everything. She didn't cry or anything, but her voice got shaky when she said, "I thought I was going to marry him." I told her that sucked and that people who ghost like that are cowards. She smiled, thanked me, and then changed the subject to conspiracy theories and how she's convinced pigeons are government spies. It was that kind of night. My third date, we were at my place eating takeout and watching a movie she'd already seen but pretended she hadn't. Halfway through, she started crying. Not a little teary-eyed moment, full-on sobbing. She curled into the corner of the couch and mumbled something about how it just hit her all at once. She apologized over and over and said she didn't mean to be this girl. I told her it was fine, that she didn't have to explain anything. She stayed the night, and we didn't hook up or anything. She just fell asleep wrapped around a pillow, and I remember thinking she must have really been heartbroken. The next few days were quiet. She didn't text as much, and when she did, it was short. I figured she needed space. I didn't want to push, but something didn't sit right, so I did what no one wants to admit they do. I looked her up. Just a casual scroll through social media, a couple mutual connections, nothing crazy. What I found stopped me cold. 2 weeks before our first date, literally 14 days, she had been engaged, not just dating. Engaged. There were pictures of her and some guy at a winery, holding hands, showing off a ring. One of those over-filtered engagement shoots with fields and backlighting and awkward forehead kisses. I thought maybe it was old and just reposted or something, but no. The comments were recent. Friends saying, "Oh, and congrats," and "finally." Then even worse, I found her announcement post, one of those long captions talking about how love isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. That was dated exactly 16 days before our first date. 2 days before we matched, she was telling the internet she'd found her person. I sat there for a while, just kind of staring at the screen like it was going to change. I felt stupid. Not because I got tricked, though yeah, that too, but because I believed her. I believed the crying, the vulnerability, the stories. I thought I was helping someone put themselves back together, but it turns out I was the landing pad, the soft place to crash, the rebound guy who didn't know he was the rebound. I sent her a message, nothing angry. Just, "Hey, can I ask you something?" She replied almost instantly, which was surprising. I asked about the engagement. I told her I saw the photos. She didn't deny it. She just said it ended. That's all. I asked when. She said, "Right before I met you." I told her that felt important, that I would have appreciated knowing. She said, "I didn't want you to see me as broken. I wanted a clean start." I didn't respond. A few days later, she unmatched me. I guess that was her way of ending it. No closure, no explanation, just gone. It didn't hurt in the way heartbreak usually does. It hurt more like stepping in gum. Like you trusted the sidewalk and it betrayed you. It was gross, and now it's stuck, and you don't even know exactly when it happened. I kept thinking back to the night she cried on my couch, wondering how much of that was real. Was she mourning the guy she was supposed to marry? Or was she just trying to fast forward into something new? Was I the first guy she matched with after the breakup, or one of several? I'll never know. That's the thing with Tinder. Sometimes you meet someone who seems genuine, who opens up, who makes you think this could be something. And sometimes you're just a pit stop on someone else's emotional road trip. Either way, I was never really in her story. I was just a chapter she needed to write quickly so she could close the book and pretend she never looked back. The thing about Tyler was he made everything sound temporary, like life was this series of soft landings and quick getaways. The first message he ever sent me said, "I'm not really looking for anything specific, just good company and bad movies." It felt harmless, honest, even. At the time, I just moved to a new part of the city and didn't know anyone outside of work. I wasn't trying to meet the love of my life. I just wanted someone to talk to after a long day, someone to laugh with over greasy takeout. So when he suggested grabbing burgers at this 24-hour diner near my place, I said yes. He looked better in person. Tall, broad shoulders, beard that was just messy enough to look good, and this deep, slow voice that made everything he said sound like a secret. He smelled like pine soap and laundry, which I weirdly noticed right away. He talked with his hands and made these tiny jokes between sentences, like he couldn't help himself. That first night we ate fries until 2 a.m. and sat in his car listening to old rock songs, talking about our childhoods like it was totally normal to get deep with a stranger before sunrise. We started seeing each other a few times a week. I'd come to his place sometimes, or what I thought was his place. It was always late at night, and he never really invited me inside. Said it was messy, that his roommates were asleep, or that he had stuff to do early. I didn't push it. Mostly, he came over to mine. He'd bring food, fall asleep on my couch, act like we'd been doing this for years. I liked that he never pressured anything, just wanted to be around. He made my apartment feel warmer, calmer. One night, maybe 2 weeks in, I asked him straight up where he lived. Not because I was suspicious. I just realized I didn't actually know. He gave me a vague answer. Said he was crashing at a friend's place temporarily, trying to find something more permanent. Something about bad timing with his lease ending and his job hours shifting. It sounded believable. I'd done it before. Half the people I knew had. But things didn't add up. There were little signs. He never had packages coming in. Never talked out neighbors. I once asked if I could drop something off for him at his friend's place, and he said, "Let's not complicate things." He didn't like taking photos, said he wasn't on social media, and never stayed over 2 nights in a row. Again, none of it screamed red flag, just maybe not that serious. And at the time, I convinced myself I was okay with that. Then one night he left his hoodie at my place, and inside the pocket was a house key. It had one of those plastic-colored covers, bright green with a chip in the corner like it had been through a lot. I didn't think anything of it until 2 days later when he asked if he left his key and got really weird about it. Not angry, just anxious. Told me to be careful with it. Asked me not to make a copy. I laughed it off, said, "I'm not starting a secret Tyler shrine." And he kind of half smiled but didn't laugh. That was the moment the tone shifted. He started coming by less. When we did talk, it felt like he was somewhere else. I asked him if everything was okay, and he'd say stuff like, "Yeah, just life being loud." Then one night, I got curious. Not out of jealousy, just confusion. I wanted to understand why he always disappeared after staying over. Why everything felt like a half story. So I did what I'm not proud of. I followed him. He left my place just after 10, said he was going to grab groceries and head home. I waited 20 minutes, then took a rideshare and input the address I'd seen once on a delivery receipt he accidentally left on my counter. I figured worst case, I'd be proven paranoid and go home feeling dumb. But when I got there, it wasn't a shared apartment with a friend. It was a house. A small 2-story with string lights on the porch and a car in the driveway I recognized as his. I stood across the street for a minute debating whether to knock or just vanish. Before I could decide, the porch light flicked on. A woman stepped outside. She looked like she'd just come out to water plants or check the mail, wearing sweatbands, hair up, holding a cup of tea or wine or something. She didn't look like someone who was confused about who lived there. She looked like someone who belonged. She went back inside without even seeing me, but it was enough. I stood there in the cold, just staring at the house, feeling the shape of the truth fill in all the empty spots. I texted him, Whose house is this? He didn't respond for an hour. When he did, it was short. Can we talk? I didn't reply. I just waited. 10 minutes later, he called. He said he was sorry, that he wasn't technically living with his ex, but she didn't know he'd started dating again. Said they'd broken up months ago, but were figuring out the logistics, whatever that meant. Claimed he slept in the guest room, that she was going through something and he didn't want to hurt her. He kept using phrases like, "It's complicated," and "I didn't mean for this to go this far." The more he talked, the less I heard, because it wasn't just that he'd lied, it was how casually he had built the lie. He'd sat on my floor and eaten popcorn. He'd watched dumb movies with me and laughed at my bad impressions. He told me he liked the way my apartment smelled and that he hadn't felt that peaceful in months. And the whole time, he was living in his ex's house, sleeping under the same roof, coming to me like it was some escape room he could disappear into. I told him I was done. He said he understood. Then, weirdly, he said, "You were the calm I needed." I hung up. It took a while to untangle my feelings after that. Not because I loved him or anything, but because he made me feel needed, like I was the safe space in his messy life. It's hard to accept that someone only wanted you because they didn't know where else to go. That you were never really in the plan, just a place to land until they figure things out. Now, when I hear someone say they're figuring stuff out, I pause, because sometimes it's true. And sometimes it means they're still living in their ex's house pretending it's just a phase. I met Hannah on a day I was wearing mismatched socks and had a caffeine headache so bad I was squinting at my phone like it was mocking me. Her profile looked normal, which was already a plus. No filters that turned her into an anime character, no pictures from 2014, and no weird group shots where you had to play detective. She looked like the kind of person who owned plants and actually kept them alive. Her bio just said, "Let's skip the small talk and argue about condiments." I was sold. I swiped right and didn't expect anything, but she messaged me within 10 minutes. Our chats were quick-witted and chaotic in the best way. She had this running joke about being emotionally allergic to ketchup, and I told her mustard looked like something invented by a bored scientist. It was easy with her. She made sarcasm feel like a shared language. When we finally met in person, it was at this little breakfast spot she picked. She ordered pancakes with a side of fries, said she liked to confuse the staff. I liked her immediately. We went on a couple more dates after that. Late-night walks, movies, spontaneous bakery runs. She wasn't overly flirty, but she had this way of looking at me when I talked like I was saying something more important than I actually was. She laughed at my dumbest jokes and once brought me a pack of gum because I mentioned offhandedly that I always forgot to buy some. It felt like something was building. Then, out of nowhere, she asked if I wanted to come to her parents' house for dinner. It was so random I actually thought she was joking. I said something like, "Meeting the parents already," and she just said, "Don't worry, they're fun, and they love feeding people." I figured maybe it was some casual thing. Maybe her parents were chill and just like to me whoever she was hanging out with. I didn't want to overthink it, so I said yes. The night of the dinner, she picked me up, which I thought was sweet. We drove about 30 minutes out to this nice little suburb. Quiet streets, porch lights on, kids riding bikes even though the sun was already going down. She seemed weirdly calm. I was nervous, joking about what I should call her parents and if I needed to bring a bottle of wine. She laughed but didn't say much. Just kept saying, "They're gonna love you." When we pulled into the driveway, her mom was already standing at the door waving. Not just waving, excited waving. Like I was someone she hadn't seen in years. I stepped out of the car and immediately got wrapped in a hug. She said something like, "It's so good to finally meet you," and pulled me inside like I belonged there. Her dad was in the kitchen, pouring drinks, smiling like we were old friends. They acted like they knew me. I figured maybe Hannah had just talked me up a lot. We sat down at the table and the whole thing felt rehearsed. Her mom asked about our anniversary. Her dad made a joke about how I finally made time for family dinner again. I looked at Hannah, trying to laugh it off, but she wasn't even blinking. Just nodding along like this was completely normal. I tried to play along, thinking maybe it was some weird family dynamic or joke I wasn't in on yet. Then her mom pulled out a scrapbook. I wish I was kidding. It was full of photos of Hannah, some recent, some old, and she said they'd saved a few pages for us. I laughed nervously and said something like, "Wow," jumping the gun a little. But her mom didn't laugh. She looked confused, even a little hurt, and said, "You two have been together for a year, right?" I looked at Hannah, And she gave me this small, frozen smile and said, almost, "That's when I knew something was wrong." I stood up, said I needed to use the bathroom, and stepped into the hallway. I took out my phone and scrolled back through our messages. We'd only been talking for 3 weeks. 3. I checked the calendar again. Yep. 3 weeks, not 3 months, not a year. I wasn't losing my mind. When I came back, Hannah was alone in the living room. Her parents were in the kitchen laughing about something. I asked her what the hell was going on. She looked at me like a kid caught cheating on a test, said she didn't know how to explain it. That she'd told her parents about me early on, like way early on, and they'd just kind of run with it. She said she hadn't had a serious boyfriend in years, and her mom kept asking if she was ever going to settle down. So when she met me, she decided not to correct them when they assumed we were already official. I asked her why she wouldn't just tell the truth. She shrugged and said, because I wanted it to be true, and it was easier this way. I left after that, politely said thank you for dinner, gave a weak smile, and got a ride share home. The whole drive back, I kept replaying everything in my head. The little comments, the way she looked at me, how fast things had moved without me even realizing it. She hadn't just jumped ahead. She dragged me along without asking. The next day, she texted me saying she'd hoped I wasn't mad and that she really did like me. I didn't respond. I didn't even know how. It wasn't just that she lied. It was that she built a whole version of us without me, introduced me to people under that version, made memories in advance and expected me to fill them in. A few weeks later, I got a message from her mom on Facebook. Just a friendly note saying she hoped I was doing well and that Hannah's still sad. I didn't reply to that either. It wasn't just awkward. It felt invasive, like I'd been unknowingly cast in someone else's fantasy. And no matter how kind it looked from the outside, the dinner, the photos, the hugs, it didn't feel like care. It felt like control. Now, whenever someone says, "I want you to meet my family," I hesitate. Because once you've been introduced as someone you're not, it's hard to know who you are to them at all. There was something about Zach's that felt kind of old school in a refreshing way. He wasn't trying too hard. No shirtless mirror selfies, no weird flexing in front of a car. His profile just said, book lover, weekend hiker, recovering pizza addict. It came with a couple of outdoorsy photos, one with a dog, one on a trail, one sitting by a campfire with a soft grin that didn't look staged. He messaged me first, said something like, "You look like someone who reads the last page of a book first." Am I wrong? I liked that. It made me laugh. We talked for a week straight. He was funny but not performative, curious without being invasive, and the kind of guy who sent actual paragraphs instead of just fire emojis or dry one-liners. He said he worked in communications, which sure is vague, but a lot of people are weirdly cryptic about jobs online, so I didn't dig too deep. He told me he liked to unplug on weekends. Said his job had him on screens too much during the week. I found that a little annoying, but also kind of admirable. Everyone's addicted to their phone now, right? So someone who chose to disconnect felt rare. Our first date was at this quiet little tea shop that I didn't even know existed. It was tucked between a hardware store and a dry cleaner, like it was trying to hide from the world. He picked it because the lighting was nice and the music wasn't too loud. And he was right. It felt like a place you go to spill secrets or read a diary out loud. He ordered this weird herbal blend I'd never heard of. I got a chai that tasted like autumn. We sat there for 2 hours talking about everything from childhood snacks to conspiracy theories about birds. He had a dry sense of humor and this way of pausing before he said something, like he wanted to get it exactly right. He wasn't big on texting, which he warned me about. Said he preferred face-to-face, so most of our conversations happened in person. Every time we met, he'd bring something small, a weird snack he found at a gas station, a book he thought I'd like, once even a rock from a trail he hiked because it looked like it had a story. I started to really like him. He was thoughtful in this quiet, almost deliberate way, like he was always paying attention, even when he didn't say much. The only thing that kept mugging me was his weekends. He'd always disappeared, like fully dropped off the map. No texts, no posts, no updates. He said he'd like to go off the grid and clear his head, and I wanted to believe that. I mean, I've dated guys who couldn't go 5 minutes without refreshing their feeds, so the idea of someone not being chained to their phone seemed like a good thing. Until it didn't. One Saturday night, I was out with some friends, and we ended up grabbing food at this late-night diner that had the news playing on a muted TV in the corner. I wasn't even watching it at first, but then I looked up and saw a clip of a protest. There was a fire, people running, cops in riot gear. The caption said something about civil unrest downtown related to a political rally. The whole thing looked chaotic. I leaned in to read the scrolling text, mostly just curious about where it was happening. And then I saw him. Zach. He was on screen for less than 3 seconds when I saw him. Clear as day. Same beanie he always wore. Same coat. He was in the middle of a crowd, holding a sign I couldn't read, face flushed, yelling at something or someone off camera. My stomach dropped. I blinked, thinking I imagined it. But when I turned to my friend and said, "Wait, can we rewind that?" she'd already seen it too. "Isn't that the guy you're seeing?" I spent the next hour deep diving on the protest. Turns out it wasn't just some casual march. It was one of those aggressive fringe rallies. The kind where people get arrested, where things break, where people show up in masks and leave with black eyes. I didn't see his name listed anywhere, but I saw more pictures. He was there. Multiple angles. Always near the front. I didn't know what to think. He'd never brought up politics, not once. Not even casually. And we talked about everything. Our families, music, books, high school trauma. I figured if he was passionate about something that intense, he'd mention it. But he hadn't. It was like there was this whole version of him that only existed when I wasn't looking. The next time I saw him, I tried to stay calm. I didn't bring it up right away. We were sitting on a park bench, eating sandwiches from a food truck, and he was telling me about a documentary he watched. He looked completely normal, chill, not like someone who'd just spent a weekend screaming in the middle of a riot. So I asked, "Hey, were you at that protest downtown last weekend?" He froze, just for a second, then said, "Yeah, I was there." I asked why he hadn't told me. He shrugged and said, "It's not really a first date topic." Then added, "People get weird when you're passionate about stuff." I asked what he meant by stuff. He gave me this long, vague answer about systems and control and freedom. Said the media never told the full story. That sometimes you have to show up and disrupt things to be heard. I asked if he went often. He said almost every weekend. That's when it hit me. Those weekends he disappeared weren't just clearing his head. He was going to protests, not peaceful rallies, not charity events. He was deep in it. The kind of stuff that gets buildings vandalized and people arrested. And I had no idea. I asked him why he kept it a secret. He said, "I didn't want you to judge me before you knew me." But the thing is, I was judging him. Not because of his beliefs. I mean, that's its own thing. But because he built this whole peaceful book reading, tea-sipping version of himself and handed it to me like it was complete. Meanwhile, the other half of him was out there getting tear-gassed and flipping signs in the middle of crowds. I told him I couldn't do it, that I didn't want to be involved in something I didn't fully understand, that I didn't feel safe not knowing which version of him was the real one. He didn't argue. He just said, "Most people don't." I walked away that day feeling like I dated a ghost, someone half visible, half true, someone who wanted connection but not clarity. And I still think about that moment on the TV screen sometimes, how 3 seconds told me more than 3 weeks ever did. And now, every time someone tells me they're off the grid on weekends, I pause. Because sometimes disappearing isn't about peace. Sometimes it's about hiding who you really are. I met Lily on a Wednesday night when I was supposed to be working but ended up aimlessly swiping instead. Her profile stopped me cold. She looked like someone who belonged in a magazine ad for perfume, not in a fake filtered way, but in a way that made you second guess your own confidence. Her first photo was her in a silky dress leaning against a railing somewhere tropical. The next was her with a glass of champagne and a claw clip and sunglasses, like she just stepped off a yacht. And then the third was her laughing, holding a dog so tiny I wasn't sure if it was real. Her bio was short. Marketing, brunch. Be kind. 3 words. That's it. I usually avoid profiles that vague, but something about her made me curious. I swiped right, and she matched with me a few hours later, messaging first with a simple, "Hey you." Our convo felt like a slow unraveling. She wasn't over the top flirty, but there was this polished charm to her. She replied with full sentences, never overused emojis, and had this way of making every reply feel like it was tailored for me. She told me she worked at a marketing firm, mostly remote, nothing exciting. Said she was really into health and wellness, went to Pilates a few times a week, and had just gotten into learning Italian because she wanted to travel solo next year. I told her I admired that, and she replied, "You'd be surprised what people do when they get tired of waiting on others." We made plans for drinks on Friday. She picked the place, a trendy rooftop bar with a view of the skyline and drinks that cost way more than they should. She showed up 10 minutes late, apologized like she meant it, and looked unreal. The kind of person who walks in and makes everyone else at the bar look like background characters. I felt underdressed even though I tried. She was easy to talk to. She asked questions that made me feel interesting. Laugh at the right moments. She told me a few stories about her clients, dropped a few celebrity names in passing. Nothing too name-droppy, but enough to make me wonder what kind of circle she really moved in. I asked her where she grew up, and she gave me a vague answer about moving around a lot. I didn't push. We kept seeing each other. Dates got nicer. Dinners at places I'd never normally go unless it was a birthday or an apology meal. She always offered to split, sometimes insisted on covering things next time. She'd talk about investments, real estate, random business ideas. Said she had a friend who was mentoring her in crypto. She mentioned casually once that she was trying to diversify her income streams, which I thought was just influencer speak for starting a blog. It was maybe our 5th date when I asked if she wanted to come over to mine. She hesitated, said her schedule was tight, then said she didn't like to mix spaces. Where I work and where I rest, I keep separate. I said no pressure, just wanted her to know she was welcome. She smiled and kissed me like she meant it. Then the weird stuff started. She was always available on weekday afternoons, never weekends. She never posted on social media, but I could tell she was always online. She never wanted to meet in more casual places, like a park or a dive bar. It was always upscale spots, lounges, rooftop patios, members-only cafes. One time I showed up early and overheard her talking to the hostess like they were best friends. She slipped her cash after we sat down. Said it was for taking care of her people. The real turning point was when I ran into her at a hotel. I was there for a work event, standing in the lobby waiting for a coworker when I saw her across the room. She was dressed in a tight black dress and heels, walking with this older guy in a suit. Not like a dad age older. Gray hair, expensive watch, the whole vibe of a man who owns something. She didn't see me. They walked to the elevator, laughing, her hand brushing his arm. I didn't know what to do. I figured maybe it was a client, a meeting, but something about the way they moved didn't feel professional. That night, I didn't say anything. I didn't text her. I just watched her stories. And of course, nothing. Blank screen. Just a reposted quote about ambition. The next time we met up, I brought it up. Asked what she was doing at the hotel. She blinked, didn't flinch, but paused a second too long. Then she smiled and said, "I have clients I meet for work all over the city. That's one of my regular spots." I asked what kind of clients. She looked at me like I'd asked something invasive, then said, "You wouldn't get it." I said, "Try me." She sighed, then said, "I do some mentoring. Wellness coaching. Some investment advising. It's complicated." I didn't know what to say. Everything she said sounded like it came from a script. I let it go, but after that, I couldn't shake the image of her and that guy. The way she laughed with him. The way she looked when she didn't know I was watching. A week later, I saw a TikTok that changed everything. It was from a girl talking about sugar baby culture. She described how some women set up professional profiles, use Tinder to find men who might be long-term investments instead of just sugar daddies. How some girls use dating apps to vet people, see if they're generous, stable, low drama. She called it playing the long game. I felt my stomach twist. I went back to my combos with Lily. Read through everything again. Saw all the signs I'd ignored. The hints she dropped about investing in people, the way she always made sure we went places where she could be seen, the way she asked questions about what I did, how much I made, if I wanted kids, what kind of apartment I had. I called her that night. I just wanted to know the truth. She answered calm as ever. I asked her directly if she was a sugar babe. She didn't deny it. She said, "I used to be. I stepped away from that scene. But yes, I had arrangements. That's not what this is. I actually like you." I asked if she was seeing anyone else. She said, "Not like that." I didn't know what to say. I didn't feel angry. I just felt stupid. Like I have an interview for a job I didn't even know I was applying for. Like I wasn't dating a person, I was being assessed for my potential ROI. We stopped talking after that. She didn't text again, and I didn't reach out. A few weeks later, I saw her in someone else's story, smiling at a fancy restaurant with a man twice her age. Still glowing, still playing the part. And now, when someone tells me they work in marketing but can't really explain what they do, I smile, nod, and keep my guard up. Because sometimes you're not dating someone, you're just being evaluated as an opportunity. I matched with Brandon while waiting in line at the DMV, which is probably the least romantic place to swipe on people. I was already in a bad mood. My number was taking forever. Some kid was screaming about gummy bears, and the guy behind me kept sighing like that would make things move faster. Brandon's profile popped up just as I was about to close the app. He had that half-smart guys do when they want to seem confident but not cocky. His bio was short, 6'2", if that matters, looking for something real, or at least real-ish. I rolled my eyes but swiped right anyway. I was bored, and something about the way he wrote real-ish made me curious. He messaged pretty quickly, asking if I was more of a breakfast or dinner person. I said dinner because breakfast people are a bit too cheerful. He agreed and sent me a meme that made me laugh out loud, which is rare with strangers. It was stupid, but it was timing that made it funny. He had a sense of humor that was just a little bit mean, but in a way that made you want to keep talking to him. We ended up messaging for a few days before he asked me out. Said he knew a taco place that didn't suck, which I appreciated. We met up on a Tuesday night, and I was surprised by how normal he seemed. In photos, he looked almost too polished, like he spent a little too long choosing the right angles. But in person, he was relaxed, wore a plain hoodie and jeans, smelled like something citrusy, and greeted me like we'd known each other a while. He had this casual confidence, like he didn't need to prove anything. The date was easy. We talked for 2 hours about random stuff. Bad tattoos, our favorite middle school teachers, what our last meals would be. He was quick, sharp, and never looked at his phone once, which earned points. He walked me to my car afterward and said, "Let's do this again." I said yes without even thinking. For a few weeks, it was kind of perfect. We went on 3 more dates, all super chill. We got coffee one morning before work, tried to make homemade pizza, failed, and went to a late-night bowling alley that smelled like old socks and nostalgia. He was funny and observant, like he remembered stuff I didn't even think he was listening to, like how I hate metal straws or that my favorite movie as a kid was Matilda. He made me feel interesting, which is a sneaky thing for someone to do if they're not being real. And one of my friends sent me a message that changed everything. It was a screenshot from Reddit. She had stumbled across a thread on some relationship forum where a guy was reviewing his dates. Not just talking about them, reviewing them, like restaurant reviews. Ratings out of 10. Strengths, weaknesses, pros, and cons. It sounded like a joke at first until I scrolled and saw a post titled, "Date number 27, the librarian." The post went into detail about a date at a taco place on a Tuesday night. He mentioned a girl who loved sour cream, hated loud chewing, and once said she had a weird, irrational fear of stairs without railings. That was me. It was all written like I was a specimen. He gave me a 7.5 for personality, a 6.5 for conversation agility, and an 8.3 for looks, which was apparently higher than average considering she wore sneakers instead of boots. He ended the post by saying, "Definitely girlfriend potential, but too skeptical, likely to snoop." I wanted to throw my phone. I couldn't believe it. This guy who remembered my favorite snacks was out here writing about me like I was part of the Yelp roundup. And it wasn't just me. I scrolled further. Dozens of posts. All about different girls. The flight attendant, the PhD, the vegan, the gym rat. Some had photos. Not full-on pictures, but little cropped ones. A hand with nail polish, the back of someone's head, a blurry side shot. He was documenting everything. I felt gross. Violated. Like someone had read my diary without asking and turned it into a BuzzFeed article. I messaged him right away. I didn't even bother trying to be calm. I sent the link and said, "You want to explain this?" He responded in less than a minute, "Wow, so you did find it." Like it was some kind of game. I said, "Are you seriously ranking people online like a creep?" And he replied with, "It's not like that. It's research. I'm collecting data for a project." A project. He told me he was working on a long-form blog series about modern dating, that he was trying to be objective and thought it would be interesting to compare real experiences. I asked if the girls knew. He said, not exactly, but I never use full names or faces. It's anonymous. I told him that didn't make it okay, that he was using people without consent, that treating dates like experiments wasn't just unethical, it was disgusting. He said I was overreacting, that it wasn't personal, that I should be flattered because I got one of the higher scores. I blocked him. But the damage was done. I couldn't stop thinking about how many other girls had no idea they were part of his twisted spreadsheet. How many had smiled at him across a table while he mentally assigned them categories. It made every moment we shared feel fake, like I was part of some documentary I never agreed to be in. I reported his Reddit account. I flagged the posts. But the mod said it didn't break any rules because it wasn't explicit, and there were no real names. The posts stayed up for weeks. Eventually, the account disappeared. Either deleted or banned, I'm not sure. But the screenshots are still out there. People were even commenting like it was funny. Haha, this guy's brutal. Man, she got off easy. I saw someone rate his reviews out of 10. It turned into a weird spiral. I started questioning every day I went on after that, wondering if I was being recorded, if someone was writing about me in some private Discord or forum. I became paranoid, guarded, like I was on a stage and didn't know it. Because that's what Brandon did. He didn't just hurt people. He made them feel like data. And now, whenever someone says they'd blog on the side or mentions being into social experiments, I walk away. No second chances. No curiosity. Because the second someone treats you like a number, you stop feeling like a person. And it's hard to forget that. I matched with Megan on a rainy Thursday night when I was home eating cereal out of a mug and pretending to care about the documentary playing in the background. Her profile caught my attention immediately, not just because she was beautiful, which she definitely was, but because her bio said, looking for something honest, spontaneous, and just a little weird. It sounded like something someone says when they've had a couple bad experiences and are still optimistic enough to try it again. Her pictures were low-key, no filters, a mix of her laughing in a hoodie, reading on a porch, and one of her standing on a mountain in a windbreaker with her hair in her face. She looked real. She messaged first, "Are you the kind of person who reads cereal boxes when you eat breakfast?" I told her I was literally doing that at that exact moment, and she said, "Soulmate behavior." From that point on, it was easy. She was smart, quick, and didn't force jokes. We had a whole conversation about which minor inconvenience would destroy us first if we were characters in a dystopian novel. She said she'd die immediately because she can't go a day without her electric toothbrush. I told her I'd fall into a hole texting while walking. We clicked. We met up that weekend for coffee, even though it was pouring and kind of miserable. She showed up in an oversized coat, completely drenched, with 2 coffees already in hand, because she said she didn't trust baristas on first dates. I liked that. She had this magnetic energy, not in a loud way, but in the kind of way where you want to keep listening to her even when she's talking about nothing. We ended up walking around with our coffees in the rain, talking for hours. She told me she was in grad school working on her thesis, and that it was ruining her brain in weird ways. I asked what it was about, and she said, "You'll find out eventually," like it was some kind of surprise. Our dates became routine quickly. We'd meet up a couple times a week, usually at odd hours. She always had a weird story to tell, like the neighbor who played the flute at 3 a.m., or how she once accidentally sent a love letter to her landlord. She made life feel like a sitcom. I loved being around her, but she never let me come to her place. Always said it was too chaotic. She didn't even want a video call. Said her Wi-Fi sucked and she hated how her face looked in webcams. I figured she just had boundaries. I didn't push it. By the 5th date, I was definitely into her. We had gone bowling, gotten late-night pancakes, and once spent 2 hours in a bookstore trying to find the ugliest book cover. I started thinking this could turn into something real. She felt close, like someone I could trust, someone who paid attention. Then one night, she started acting different. We were at my apartment, eating noodles and watching some dumb comedy she picked. She seemed distracted. Kept checking her phone, typing furiously every time I got up to grab water or throw something away. I finally asked if everything was okay. She said, yeah, just school stress. She mentioned her thesis again, said she was almost at the finish line, and that I might get a shout out in the acknowledgments. I laughed and said, as long as I don't get a footnote, and she gave me this tight smile that didn't feel like a smile at all. A few days later, we met for lunch and she seemed lighter, happier. She said she'd submitted a big chunk of her project and finally felt like she could breathe. I asked again what it was actually about, and she paused, then said, "I'll explain soon. I promise." I told her she was building it up too much. She said, "You'll get it when you see it." And that's when it started unraveling. Later that week, my friend texted me a screenshot from a TikTok that was blowing up. It was a clip of a girl talking about this experiment she did for her thesis. She was studying male behavior on dating apps, but not just swiping or message analysis. She actually hired someone to match with guys, go on dates with them, and document everything. Full field research. Every date was recorded in notes. Some were filmed with consent after the fact, and the goal was to see how men reacted in various emotional and social situations. I felt my stomach drop when I saw the screenshot. It was Megan. She had a hoodie on, same one she wore on our first date. She was laughing in the clip, saying, "You wouldn't believe how many guys think they're the ones asking the questions." The comments were a mess, some people calling her a genius, others saying it was manipulative. I searched her name, and sure enough, her thesis project had a title: Emotional Mapping in Casual Dating Environments, a Mixed Methods Approach. I didn't even know what that meant, but I knew what it felt like. I messaged her that night, just sent the clip with a question mark. She replied, "After 2 hours, I was going to tell you." I asked if I was part of it. She said yes. She said I was case 17, that she picked me because I seemed emotionally self-aware and not aggressive. That made her feel safe. I asked if anything between us had been real. She said most of it. I asked if she'd been writing things down after our dates. She said yes. I asked if she used our conversations in her research. She said yes again. She said I came off well, if that helped. It didn't. She offered to let me read the draft. I didn't reply. A few days later, she sent me a PDF of her thesis. I opened it once. Scrolled to a section labeled Case 17. There I was, not by name, but every little detail was there. My jokes, my insecurities, my favorite book, my fear of heights. She wrote that I was unexpectedly empathetic, that I responded well to vulnerability, and that I had maintained curiosity without overstepping. She also said I showed signs of emotional availability typically seen in longer-term partners, and that it made her reconsider the limits of her project. I stopped reading there. I didn't block her. I didn't yell or accuse or send any long messages. I just stepped away. I didn't want to be a quote in someone's study. I didn't want to be case 17 or a line in a PowerPoint. I wanted to be a person. A real one. One who went on dates because they liked someone, not because they were part of a controlled environment. Now, anytime someone tells me they're writing a thesis on human behavior, I smile, nod, and brace myself. Because sometimes the person sitting across from you isn't just there to get to know you. Sometimes they're there to study how you react when they pretend to. I met Josh during a streak of strange luck, the kind where your coffee is always the perfect temperature and every parking spot magically opens up. He was one of those Tinder matches that feels oddly familiar, like someone you maybe passed at a grocery store once or saw on the train and wondered about for a second too long. His photos were mostly candid shots, smiling with a backpack on, holding a drink at a street festival, and one blurry selfie in a mirror that clearly wasn't meant to impress anyone. His bio said, "Looking for something honest, fun, and not entirely boring. Bonus points if you like dessert." I messaged him first. I said, "You had me at dessert." He replied with, "You get bonus points just for showing up." He was smooth, but not in the rehearsed way. He asked real questions and actually waited for the answers. We talked for a few days before he asked me of. I said yes, thinking it would be a casual drink and maybe some awkward small talk. Instead, it turned into one of those dates where you forget to check the time. We met at this dim little bar with mismatched furniture and a jukebox that only played sad songs from the 90s. He walked in wearing a wrinkled button-up and looked exactly like his photos, which is rare enough to deserve a standing ovation. He gave me this lopsided grin and said, "You're better looking than my phone said you were." I liked him immediately. The conversation was easy. He told me he worked in software, but he didn't get all technical about it. Said he liked solving problems and hated meetings. He had a dry sense of humor that made everything feel less serious. When I told him I was a graphic designer, he asked if I hated Comic Sans on a personal or spiritual level. He made me laugh so hard I snorted, which only made him laugh harder. Over the next few weeks, we kept seeing each other. He was thoughtful in a quiet way. He brought me pastries from this bakery near his office, texted me songs that reminded him of our conversations, and once even picked up my prescription when I was sick without me asking. He had this gentle, low-maintenance energy that made him feel safe to be around. The kind of guy you'd want in your corner if your life ever fell apart. So when he invited me to his work party, I said yes without hesitation. He said it was a corporate thing, just some yearly event with food and awkward dancing. He asked if I could dress a little more formal, which was fine. I assumed it was at a hotel or one of those rented event spaces downtown. He didn't tell me much else, just that it was important and he wanted me to come. We got there and it was fancier than I expected, like tuxedos and chandeliers fancy. I wore a dress I'd been saving for something nice and he cleaned up really well. Everyone was friendly, polite, just drunk enough to loosen up. We grabbed drinks, walked around, and he introduced me to a few coworkers who seemed surprised to meet me, which I chucked up to him being private at work. Then this older woman approached us. She was tall, elegant, and had this very expensive-looking bracelet that kept catching the light. She looked at me, smiled, and said, "So this is the fiancé?" I laughed instinctively and said, "Not quite." She tilted her head and looked at Josh. He looked frozen. Then he smiled, big fake, too fast, and said, "I didn't want to spoil the surprise." I looked at him thinking it was some kind of joke, but he didn't laugh. He just squeezed my hand a little and said, "Let's talk later." The woman congratulated us and walked away, clearly delighted. The rest of the night was a blur. People kept coming up to us, offering congratulations, telling us how great we looked together, asking when the wedding was, and Josh kept playing along, smiling, nodding, saying things like, "We haven't picked a date yet," or "Still trying to find a venue." I didn't say anything in the moment because I didn't want to cause a scene, but inside I was spiraling. When we got back to his car, I asked what the hell that was. He sighed and stared at the steering wheel for a full 10 seconds before saying, "I needed you to be my fiancé, just for tonight." I thought I misheard him. I said, "What are you talking about?" He explained, and it only got worse. Apparently, he had told his family that he was engaged months ago because his grandfather had been pressuring him to settle down, and there was a chunk of inheritance that only kicked in once he committed to a future. He didn't think it would matter. Said he figured he'd find someone eventually, and it wouldn't be a big deal. But the party? That was a family work crossover. His uncle, his cousin, even his grandfather were there. And they all believed I was his fiancé because he showed them pictures, because he talked about me like I was real. And now I was. I asked him if he was serious. He said yes. I asked if he actually planned to tell me at any point. He said eventually. I got out of the car. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just stood there on the sidewalk in heels that suddenly felt 2 sizes too small. He got out and said, "Please don't be mad. It wasn't just for the money. I really like you." I said, "Use me. You made me a character in a lie I didn't agree to." He said, "I was going to tell you. I thought maybe you'd understand." I didn't respond. I got a ride home and blocked him the next day. A week later, I got a message request from someone with his last name. His sister. She said she was sorry. That Josh had pulled stunts like this before. That she'd hope I was okay. I didn't reply. It's been months now, and I still think about that night sometimes. The way everyone looked at me like I was part of a love story. Like I was a person someone had chosen. And how underneath all that fake glitter I was just a tool, a prop, a means to an end. Now, when someone invites me to a family event too early, I hesitate. Because once you've been introduced to someone you're not, it's hard to know if anything that came before it was even real. Some people treat dating like a search for connection. Others treat it like a game. And then there are people like Ashley, the kind you treat it like a science experiment where they're both the lab tech and the test subject, and you're just there. I didn't realize that at first, obviously. If I had, I wouldn't have gone on that first date, or the second, or let her sleep over in my bed while telling me about her favorite childhood cereal like it meant something. We met on a Sunday afternoon, which already made it feel kind of wholesome. Her profile was playful. A picture of her holding a giant slice of pizza, another mid-laugh at a pumpkin patch, and one where she was sitting on the floor with a cat in her lap and a messy bun on her head. Her bio said, trying this again, be tall, be kind, be funny. Pick at least two. I liked the vibe. It wasn't trying too hard. I swiped right. She messaged me a few hours later. So which two are you? I said, funny and kind. I'm working on tall, she said. That's acceptable. We met 3 days later for smoothies and a walk in the park, her idea, which I like because most people default to drinks. She said she didn't like meeting people for the first time in dark, loud places. I respected that. The date was great. She had this upbeat, chatty energy that made silence feel comfortable instead of awkward. She asked questions about my job, my friends, whether I liked my siblings, and if I ever thought about leaving the city. She told me she worked in UX design and had recently gotten really into kickboxing. Said she'd been out of a relationship for a while and was just starting to see what's out there again. I liked her immediately. Things moved quickly, but in a way that felt fun. We saw each other a few times a week. She started leaving a toothbrush at my place, texting me good night, sending me TikToks at 1 a.m. saying, "This is us." I didn't think twice about it. I was all in. And when I finally asked her if she was seeing anyone else, she said, "Not seriously." I didn't love that answer, but we weren't exclusive yet, so I let it go. Then came the night we ran into her friend. We were out grabbing Thai food, sitting by the window, when this guy walked past and did a double take. He came inside, smiling like they were old friends, and gave her this weird half hug while glaring at me the whole time. She introduced him as Jake, and said they used to date but were cool now. Jake didn't say much to me. Just nodded and said, "Didn't realize you were dating." Ashley gave this tight smile and said, "Life moves fast." He left after a minute, but she seemed rattled. I asked if she was okay, and she brushed it off, saying, "He's dramatic, ignore him." I did because I trusted her, but from that point on, little things started popping up. Like how she'd freak out if I posted a photo with her in the background, or how she'd get weirdly quiet after looking at her phone, then say she had to leave. One night, I accidentally saw a message pop up on her screen. A guy named Jake asking, "So, is it working?" I didn't say anything. I just watched. Waited. Then came the night everything snapped into place. We were at my place watching a movie. She was half asleep, wrapped in a blanket, and was scrolling through Reddit on my laptop. I clicked into a random thread about dating horror stories, not looking for anything, just bored, when I saw a comment that stopped me cold. It was from a guy who said his girlfriend was trying to train him by going on Tinder dates. His words. She told me she needed to show me what I was losing. She said seeing her with other people would make me get my act together. I sat there staring at it, reading it again and again. And the username? JakeLovesBizza91. I didn't want to leave it, but I clicked his profile. There were other comments, some deleted, one about her latest Tinder guy who thinks they're dating for real. He wrote that he wasn't worried because she always comes back. I felt my stomach drop. I looked over at Ashley, still curled up in a blanket, still pretending this was a normal night. I asked her, straight up, "Are you using me to make your ex jealous?" She froze, didn't move, didn't blink. Then she sighed, sat up, and said, "It's not like that." I asked her what it was like then. She said she and Jake had been on and off for years, that they were toxic, that she loved him but didn't know how to fix things. She said she thought if he saw her with someone else, it might snap him out of it, that maybe he realized she was worth it. I asked her, "And what am I in all this?" She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You were the right kind of guy to pull it off." I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just stood up, opened the door, and told her to leave. She didn't fight it, just gathered her things and left without saying much. A week later, she texted me. Just said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you." I was desperate. I didn't reply. There wasn't anything to say. The worst part wasn't that she lied. It wasn't even that she used me. It was that I let myself fall for someone who saw me as a tool, a reaction, a strategy in someone else's mess. Now, when someone tells me they just got out of something complicated, I listen a little harder. I ask a few more questions. Because being someone's lesson is one thing, but being their leverage, that's something else entirely. There was something effortlessly likable about Ryan. I matched with him during one of those weekends where everything in my life felt slightly unhinged. Work was stressful, my roommate was annoying me, and I'd eaten popcorn for dinner 3 nights in a row. His profile stood out mostly because of his dog, or more specifically, the way he talked about his dog. Proud dad to Baxter. He likes long walks, chicken jerky, and judging me. There were 3 photos of them together, and the last one was Ryan wearing a t-shirt that said, "Dogs greater than people." I didn't even have to think about it. I swiped right. He messaged first. Something simple like, "Baxter and I approve of your face." I laughed. We started chatting. He was laid back, kind of goofy, and asked questions that didn't feel copy-pasted. He told me he worked in landscaping, had a side hustle selling vintage furniture online, and spent most of his weekends hiking or hanging with a furry dude. I told him I liked dogs but didn't have one. He said, "Then it's decided. You're joining our pack." Our first date was a coffee and walk situation, which worked out great because I got to meet Baxter too. He was one of those chunky little dogs that waddled more than walked and had a face that made you want to give him your bank password. Ryan showed up in joggers, holding a leash in one hand and a reusable cup in the other, smiling that the world didn't bother him much. He was sweet, easy to talk to, and clearly obsessed with his dog in a way I found genuinely adorable. We talked about everything on that first walk. Music, how he hated elevators, his opinion on pineapple on pizza. He was a fan, unfortunately. He didn't seem like he was putting on a show. There was nothing slick about him, and I liked that. After about 2 hours of walking, we sat on a bench and split a bag of chips from a corner store. He handed me the last one and said, "This is love," joking but kind of not. I left that date smiling like an idiot. Things moved quickly in the best kind of way. We started seeing each other twice a week, and 3 times. He picked me up with Baxter in the back seat, and we'd grab takeout, go on late-night drives, or just sit on his couch watching dumb reality shows and tossing popcorn at the dog. He told me about his past relationships, his plans to one day buy land and build his own house, and how he didn't talk to his dad anymore because the guy never understood dogs, which tells you everything. He had a quiet charm that made you feel like you were already part of something, like you belonged. But then came the weirdness. It started small. One night we were watching TV and Baxter started barking like crazy at the window. I peeked outside expecting a raccoon or a delivery guy, but there was nothing. Ryan jumped up and shut the curtains fast, mumbling, "Don't worry about it." I asked what it was. He said something vague about stray cats. I let it go. Then one morning, I woke up early after staying the night and noticed him outside, pacing in his backyard on the phone. He looked agitated. I couldn't hear much, just fragments. Stuff like, "No, I told you not now, it's not ready yet." When he came back in, I asked if everything was okay. He said it was just work stuff, nothing major. That didn't sit right with me. Then came the backyard. I've been over a bunch of times, but he never let me go past the back patio. Said there was nothing back there but old tools and a patch of grass Baxter's claimed as his. But one evening, I wandered a little further while he was inside on a call. I wasn't trying to snoop. I was literally just tossing a stick for the dog when I noticed the shed. It wasn't that the shed itself was suspicious. It was how new it looked. The rest of the yard was kind of wild and unkempt, but this shed was freshly painted. It had a tiny ramp leading up to it, like it was made for frequent use. There were 2 large padlocks on the door. Before I could get closer, he came out and said, "Hey, Baxter's not supposed to be back there," even though I was the one who walked over. He laughed it off, guided me back to the patio, and kissed me like he was trying to distract me. It worked for a little while. But my curiosity was piqued. A few nights later, I did what any person who's seen too many crime shows might do. I Googled him. I wasn't expecting anything wild. Maybe a weird high school photo or a traffic ticket. But one link stopped me cold. It was a local news article from about a year ago. Headline: "Backyard breeder busted in illegal dog selling operation." I clicked. The article detailed how a man, same name, same age, same general area, had been caught running unlicensed backyard breeding setup. He was fined, his license to own multiple dogs revoked, and the property was supposedly cleared. No jail time, just a lot of backlash from the community. There was a grainy photo of him holding a puppy. I felt sick. The next time I saw him, I didn't say anything right away. I wanted to hear what he'd say. So I asked him more about Baxter, where he got him. If he ever thought about getting another. He looked me dead in the eye and said I rescued him. That was it. I told him I needed to leave early that night. When I got home, I messaged him the article, no caption, just a link. He replied an hour later. I knew you'd find it eventually. He said he used to be involved in breeding but had gotten out of it. Said he only ever did it because he loved dogs and didn't trust the system. Claimed the article blew everything out of proportion and that he never hurt any animals. I asked him if he was still doing it. He didn't answer. A few days later, I drove by his house. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help it. The shed was still there. 2 women were walking away from it, one holding a small puppy in a blanket. I blocked him that night. I reported his profile. I don't know if it made a difference. What messed me up most wasn't just what he did. It was how he pretended to care so much. How he used Baxter to build a version of himself that people would trust. He knew what kind of guy he needed to be to get in the door. The dog dad. The guy with simple dreams and good taste in coffee. But behind all of it was something selfish. Something cold. Now when someone says they love dogs, I still smile. But I ask a few more questions, just in case. There's a weird sort of rush that comes with talking to someone who makes you feel like the center of the universe, even if it's only for a few days. That was Kim. From the second we matched, it felt like she was everywhere, liking my old posts on Instagram, sending me perfectly timed texts, replying to stories before I even finished uploading them. Normally, that would have felt like too much, too fast, but with her, it somehow worked. She had this vibe like she already knew me, like we were just picking up from a conversation we hadn't started yet. Her profile was aesthetic to the point of being suspicious. Filtered beach shots, matcha-lats on clean wooden tables, moody rooftop sunsets. Her bio just said, writer. Yes, I'll probably write about you. I thought it was cute. Thought it meant she was the kind of person who journaled or maybe wrote cheesy poetry. I didn't know she meant it literally. She asked me out first. Said she was tired of small talk, and that I seemed refreshingly normal. I said I'd take that as a compliment. We met at this dim bar with candles on the tables and terrible acoustic covers of pop songs playing in the background. She was late, like 20 minutes late, but she walked in with a book in her hand, an actual book, and no apology like she didn't owe anyone anything. She sat down across from me and said, sorry, I was writing. Lost track of time. We got drinks, and she immediately dove into a story about a bad date she'd been on recently. Not in a bitter way, more like a storyteller running through plot points. She described everything like a script. The way the guy chewed his food, the silence that dragged between every joke that didn't land, the awkward goodbye where he tried to hug her and she flinched. I was laughing so hard I spilled my drink. She said, see, this is better already. The rest of the date was great. She had a sharp, observational sense of humor and a way of making everything feel like a secret you were being let in on. She asked a lot of questions about me, weird ones like, what's your worst habit you're secretly proud of? And if you could be remembered for one sentence, what would it be? They were fun, different. I thought she was just quirky. I didn't realize she was collecting. After that night, we kept seeing each other. Casual stuff. Coffee dates, late night walks, bookstore browsing. She didn't like doing the same thing twice and always had a new spot in mind. A tiny gallery opening, a food truck festival, a poetry reading in someone's living room. She'd kiss me mid-sentence, leave notes in my jacket pocket, text me things like, don't fall in love with me, I'm bad for your algorithms. It all felt chaotic in the best way. But looking back, I should have noticed how much she was watching me. Not in a creepy way. Just studying, like I was a character she was trying to understand. She'd ask how I felt about specific situations, then follow up days later with, you still feel the same about that. She remembered every word I said. Once I mentioned I didn't like anchovies on pizza, and 2 weeks later when we ordered, she looked at me and said, no anchovies. He's morally opposed. It was funny then. Not so much now. The shift happened slowly. She started texting a little less. Canceling plans more often. Saying she was in a writing hole or on deadline. I figured she was just busy. She told me she was working on something important. A project I actually care about this time. I didn't press for details. I wanted to be supportive. I even brought her favorite overpriced cookies from this bougie bakery once and left them at her door. Then one night I was scrolling on Twitter and saw a tweet from this publishing intern I follow. It said, "If this modern dating memoir gets picked up, it's going to be everywhere." Already obsessed with the pitch. I clicked the attached screenshot. It was a pitch summary from some writer named Kim. It described a memoir made up of essays, each one centered on a different date or connection, told in a raw, intimate, and observational tone that blends humor with vulnerability. Sounded familiar. I kept reading. The pitch included some sample lines. One said, "There was the guy who overthought everything, who treated emotions like math problems. I watched him explain away every part of himself like he was warning me not to get too close." Another said, "He was the kind of person who said, 'I'm just being honest,' after every moment of emotional cowardice." I felt my throat tighten. She used phrases I'd said, conversations we'd had. Little personal things I'd opened up about now turned into punchy one-liners in a pitch to get published. I texted her. No small talk. Just, "Is your writing project about me?" She took a while to reply, and finally, "Parts of it. It's about a few people, you're one." I asked if she planned to tell me. She said, "I didn't think you want to know." I asked, "Did any of it mean anything to you?" She said, "Of course. That's why I wrote it down." I didn't know what to do with that. I wasn't even angry at first, just stunned. Like someone had reached inside my head and printed out pieces of me for strangers to judge. She didn't use my name. She didn't include photos, but she used me. Used the way I think, the way I talk, the things I shared in moments where I thought we were building something real. It wasn't even the fact that she was a writer. It was that I wasn't a person to her. I was source material. I didn't respond after that. I didn't tell her how sick it made me to know my vulnerability had been edited into a quirky paragraph somewhere in a Google Doc. She followed up with a message a week later that said, "I'm sorry. I got carried away. I didn't think it would hurt you, but it did, more than I expected." A few months later, I saw a promo post for her book. Not a full release, just one of those coming soon teasers with a vague description and moody cover. One of the blurbs said it was brutally honest and deeply personal. I hope she sells 1 million copies, I really do. But I also hope everyone who reads it knows that behind every deeply personal line, there's a real person out there who never agreed to be part of the story. Now when someone tells me they're a writer, I smile politely. Then I keep a little more to myself, just in case.